Hey, you guys, I hope you are doing awesome. Hey, I want to ask you a question. Do you ever feel like loneliness is this thing that just follows after you wherever you go? Like, no matter what you do, you can't get rid of it. You just feel like you never belong, even when you're with your friends. I would say that that's probably one of the most common things that my clients over the years would talk to me about. They might not come right out and say, I'm feeling really lonely. But I could always read between the lines, and I could see the sadness. I could see that they never felt like, they were one of something, right? So I think there's a huge price to pay. I think the price of loneliness is incredibly staggering if it's not addressed. And I'm not going to tell you that it's easy, but I can tell you what worked for me. Okay. But before I do, I just want you to think about some people in your life and maybe you're one of them, that is self-destructing through maybe drugs, alcohol, sex. Maybe they've gotten pregnant. Maybe they have bad relationship after bad relationship after bad relationship. Maybe they're just not solid. They're not doing well. Okay, I've seen it in so many variety of ways, and I bet you have too. My major issue, and I think a lot of people's issue, is they don't even know where they fit in the world. Okay, so for me, I had to go back to and settle the question of who is God? Who is he? What is he like? If he exists, then who am I to him, right? And if God doesn't exist, then does that mean that I just have to keep striving and striving and striving until I feel like I'm worth something? I gotta be honest, I tried it and it didn't work. Okay? So I would call what I did was long-term, in-depth research into who God was. I had to know what his character was like, because the character that I remember when I was a kid and the way I was raised was scary. It was really scary. And I did not want to have anything to do with that God. Okay, so I had a pretty critical mind about it. I just want to be honest with you. I was not one of those people that just was like, oh, I'm all in. I want to be a Jesus lover right away. I couldn't do that just because of the way I was raised. And it wasn't about my parents, by the way. It's just how I felt about it. So, over the course of this research, I became incredibly humbled by the way that I would hold God responsible for bad things in my life because of his character. I started learning how kind he is, how patient he is, how confusing he is, how mysterious he is, how I'm never going to understand all of him, how justice orientated he is even when he doesn't do it on my timetable, and how crazy in love he is with all of us, including you. That was very humbling. I was just kind of broken about it for a little while. So then that led to, okay, if God really does exist and he is who he says he is, what does that make me? Okay, so let's just pretend that he is who he says he is. He is the God of all, everything that's ever been created. He is the author of that. He is the King of Kings, so that makes me a princess, you a princess or prince. And it means that we have an inheritance with him in heaven. Now, if we can settle how important we are to God, then we have settled it, period. Because he's the only one that really matters. His thoughts about us are the only one that matters in all of eternity. I mean, if you were to look at the huge picture and the scope of eternity, whose opinion of us matters the most? And it's him. Jesus is really all that matters. And to argue with him about our importance, about who we are to him and where we fit in this big picture, this messy picture of life, is it's laughably ridiculous, at least it was for me, because over the course of figuring out who he was and figuring out who I am to him, I mean, I was like, what sane person would sacrifice everything for me, including torture, like on this earth and in hell? Like, When we look at how the Romans tortured people, it was like, oh my gosh, I just like, wow, no. And so for him to do that for me, if I were the only person to ever exist, and for you, if you were the only person to ever exist, he would have done the same thing. Because we can't earn our way to heaven. We can't do it. So he had to pay the price. He had to step in and say, I'll pick up the tab for her. I'll pick up the tab for him. It's humbling, right? So when I start to feel lonely, I have to remember that God is always with me. He is looking out for me. I am part of his big story. He is the author of all of this. Even now, he doesn't create the bad, right? But we live in a fallen world. Free will is a dangerous thing. You know, he wanted us to be able to freely choose to love him. And that meant that we could freely choose to not, and freely choose to do evil, and freely choose to hurt people. And he's the ultimate gentleman. He wants us to choose. You know, he doesn't want to force his way on anyone. And that part really meant a lot to me also. So I could make a choice. And my choice is to remember who I am to him. I'm a child of God. I'm a princess, and so are you, or a prince. And we don't have to walk around and feel like we are unacceptable, we are unworthy. Now, it is a process to tackle those critical thoughts that we have about ourselves and just say, that isn't true. And then you think about something else. No, I'm important. And that means that I'm not going to take, bad behavior by other people. That means that I'm going to deal with my own bad behavior. That means that I'm going to start making the next right decision because it's the right thing to do. That means that I'm going to respond with intense gratitude and live my life for God because of what he did for me. And that has incredible value. In the whole scope of eternity, he's all that matters. So for me, that fixed my loneliness issue. For me, that helped me determine what kind of people were going to be in my life, what kind of things were going to be in my life, because I was on mission. And you guys are my mission, by the way, so that you cannot have to deal with some of the stuff that we've had to deal with, so your life isn't derailed like some of ours have been. Okay, I'm on mission. So I don't have the time to deal with stuff that's not of God, because I am worth something, and so are you. And over time, the confidence starts to build, and you sit in the middle. That's real, true humility. You are not thinking more of yourself, and you're not thinking less of yourself. You're just thinking of yourself the way God does. If you have some questions about that, you can email me, Teresa@fortheloveofteenagers.com. I'd love to hear from you. Comment, whatever you'd like to do. But I just want you to know that you are loved. You are so deeply loved. And there's no reason to feel lonely. I know that it's a process, it's a journey, but I just hope that you will take the first step in figuring that out. So anyway, I just love you all. See you next time. Bye.